Welcome to the First Waves podcast, which is for all of you who would like to further boost your career development and continuously improve day after day. If you want to bring even more value for your company, bet on yourself, and have a great career in the corporate world, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, an environmentally friendly online training company that cares about your personal development. My guest today is Rick Morris, who's a certified Scrum Agile Master, a human behavior consultant, a best-selling author, mentor, and focuses on bringing people value. Rick is an accomplished project manager and public speaker. His appetite for knowledge and passion for the profession makes him an internationally sought-after speaker, delivering keynote presentations for large conferences and PMI events around the world. He holds the PMP certification, which is the Project Management Professional Certificate, the MPM, which stands for Masters of Project Management, and also the Scrum Agile Master, the SAFe Certificate, the PMI ACP, Six Sigma Green Belt, Total Quality Management, ITIL, and various other ISO certifications and more. Rick has consulted numerous clients in a wide variety of industries, including financial services, entertainment, construction, nonprofit, hospitality, pharmaceutical, retail, and manufacturing. Rick has over 100 implementations of project and portfolio management and agile systems. He has a total of 4 books. One is called The Everything Project Management Book, the second book, Project Management That Works, and the third book is named Stop Playing Games. His latest book is called No Day But Today, which is an Amazon #1 bestseller. Rick also appears weekly on his live radio show, The Work-Life Balance, on the Voice of America Business Network and is featured contributor to the Transformational Leader podcast for the John Maxwell team. He now has a new role at Centric Consulting as their National Delivery Lead, Enterprise Portfolio and Program Management Services. We could speak with Rick about so many different topics, and for today, we will focus our conversation on Scrum and if it can be combined with other project management methodologies. If you already heard the conversation with Rick in the Business Excellence for Managers podcast, then please note that this is the same recording, because I find this content very helpful for you as an employee as well as for those who are in a manager role. I'm thrilled to introduce you to this amazing guest, Rick. Hi, Rick, and welcome to the Business Excellence for Managers podcast. It's so great to have you here.
So excited to be here. Let's go.
Yeah, excellent. It's great that you took the time. And I'm very curious to know, what was your journey to get to where you are today and what are you passionate about?
Wow, crazy journey to see if I can, I'm going on 51 now. So I don't know how you do that in, 2 minutes or less, but we'll do it best. Actually, the fun fact, I was a kid of the kingdom. So at 11 years old, I had a job dancing on Cinderella's castle at Disney World. And I worked seasonal shows. We did like a Christmas and a spring show and that kind of stuff. I got to be, Pluto in the parades when I was 16, got a job. When I was 17, doing audio video work for the Mickey Mouse Club in Orlando. So for a long time, I was going to be in entertainment and came up through that, went on tour with a group called The Party. It's just really, really cool stuff. And then I lost my father. And so when I lost my father, I kind of left town and tried to reimagine my life and started in restaurant management, which led me to customer service, which led me to this incredible job called project management. And I don't know if I had a clean desk or what it was, but somebody was just like, you're going to be a project manager. And I fell in love with it. I was blessed to be at GE where they really believed in the title of project management. It wasn't just a title they gave away. They made me earn it and I loved it. I became a turnaround specialist for Xerox after that. So they send me into the worst of the worst projects. And I had 2 weeks to determine, how do we solve it? How big is the check we've got to write to get away or whatever it is that we had to do. Came off the road and decided I wanted to write a book and had a really, really dear friend allow me to build a PMO at his company and try a lot of different theories that I wanted to put in the book. Did that for a couple of years and then eventually ended up at R Squared Consulting, which is a company I had started to then put a lot of the techniques that we put into the book into play. So I was speaking all over the world for PMI and leading project portfolio management implementations, specifically around tools. And I chose software because a lot of companies won't invest into training of project management, but they will invest in software thinking that the software is going to solve their project management issues. So I always use that as that tip of the spear going, okay, well, I'll implement the software, but that gives me an opportunity to train and work with the project managers as well. So that was kind of my tip of the spear to get into organizations. Once the pandemic hit, I got back into the market and excited now to be the National Enterprise Project Portfolio Manager Delivery Lead for a company called Centric Consulting. And what was really cool about Centric is when they were describing the company culture and how they wanted to build a consulting firm, I have a video on the R Squared Consulting website that says all the same things they were saying, but it was like, I shot that like 8 years before I met them, right? I mean, the video's old now, but I was just like, I think we're a match. Like, I think this is what we're supposed to be doing. So I just joined them. I'm passionate and have been called an evangelist for project management. That does go into the agile world as well as the project management world, and just really passionate in what I believe is that project managers make dreams come true. You can develop that software package or build that building or bring that technology to market, but it's not going to get to its full fruition unless you have somebody like us behind it. And our goal really isn't to plan and do status report. I know, our job is not to do reports and meetings and document meeting minutes. Our job is to inspire and pull the best out of the people that are working within the plant, right? And
Exactly.
that's what I'm passionate about doing.
And not just create PowerPoint presentations, because I've seen project managers who are 80% of the time just creating PowerPoints, and 20% of the time they're just doing the real work, what they should be doing as project managers and getting things executed. And that's why I think there are some companies that are really trying to go down with their PowerPoint presentations. And I think even Amazon, they said, we don't want any PowerPoints. We would just like people to be more effective and more efficient at what they do. And we just have bullet points on a normal sheet of paper.
Well, but I mean, when you analyze it, and that was one of the big questions I always ask when I come into a conversation is how much time is your project manager spending looking backwards? Because the goal is to look forwards, right? But if we're holding status meetings and we're updating risk logs and we're updating issue logs and we're documenting meeting minutes, all that stuff has already happened. So if 85% of my job is documenting what happened 2 weeks ago versus what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks, it's like, where do you want the focus? And so I have enjoyed a lot of the technology that's come to market for project managers because it is helping solve some of that in arrears issue. If somebody's billing time, why is that not automatically updating the project schedule? Things like that. I mean, like, let's look at things that we're doing naturally and allow that to flow so that nobody has to go back and do anything twice, right? And that's always been a big focus.
Really good. Yeah, what I also heard from your introduction that this love for project management, and that's something that I've seen as well, that either you really love it or you don't like it that much. And I was one of those who was so in love with project management from the beginning of my career. I was in my first training, I think there were about 20 people in that training. And I was probably the only one from 20 who was so in love with it. I was thinking, wow, this is like so magnificent. I was really like in seventh heaven, and all these tools that they were showing us. And I was thinking, oh, that tool, I knew it somehow. I was using it intuitively, but I did not know that it has a specific name and that it's, you could put it in a certain structure. And that is magnificent. So I was like really that nerd student with the apple, giving it to the trainer. And, and then after we were done with that training, it was a corporate training. I think I was the only one who finished my project from those 20 people. Maybe there are another 5 or 6 who finished their projects, but they were really struggling and they just went back to their daily work and they were not so passionate about it. And that was really for me like the realization when I later became a trainer, just to realize that when I train teams and employees and companies, that it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. And that maybe out of a group of 10 people, I might have 1 or 2 who are going to really be the ones who's going to continue and do the projects, and the rest of them, they might be applying the tools that they have learned during their business as usual. They might know, okay, now I know what they're doing. I know what the workshops, how they're structured, but they're not going to be the project managers of tomorrow.
That's
so,
right.
And that's fine because you cannot run company only with project managers. So I think actually it's quite okay to have that balance. That not everybody can go into the career path of a project manager. But definitely for those who like it, it's a wonderful world. And you're also a Scrum Agile Master. Could you tell us more about Scrum and the Agile methodology?
Yeah, so interesting that that certification actually means that I've done a deep dive in the 17 major certifications and understand the differences between. So Scrum itself, it's one Agile, Scrum, all those terms are these things that are used interchangeably. Scrum itself, I think, was even named after the rugby term called a scrum. But basically, everybody's locked together, looking at the ball, getting ready to go. I think that was the point. And so when Agile really came onto the market, it was 2001, right? Is when the Agile Manifesto was signed, but there were 17 people that signed it. And all 17 people had a different idea or variation of how to do Agile. So the only thing they actually did agree on was 4 covenants, right? And those covenants are pretty well known. You can look those up at the Agile Manifesto. But how you apply those covenants became 17 different variations. I think there's 26 variations now that are largely practiced. But even if you go into an organization and you go, hey, are you guys Agile? They go, yeah. And you go, what methodology do you use? They go, we got our own, right? They've taken some of this and some of that. And I think that's the point. Where most people get confused around what Agile really is Agile isn't a methodology. It's a method of thinking. It's a line of thinking. If I could give an example, I was working with a large organization and they approached us saying, we want a data warehouse. Okay. And we want to do it Agile because we understand Agile does everything faster. So that's the first thing that's not true. However long it takes to do the work is how long it's going to take to do the work. What Agile allows, though, is to operationalize the work sooner. So if you think of a standard waterfall project and doing a data warehouse, the first thing you're going to do is identify everything that you need, identify all the inputs. You're going to spend 3 years developing the data warehouse before you start to get any business output. And then when you start to actually deliver, then you're 3 years into debt before you can start to operationalize. If you look at that from an Agile perspective, before we even started the data warehouse, my question is, what are we going to use the data warehouse for? And they just kind of look at you, go, we don't know. We need to see all the data until we can do it. I was like, no, you don't. So why don't we pick something that we can start with? And they were like, well, we need to improve our sales. Great. How do we improve our sales? Well, we should do local market plans. Okay. How do you do a local market plan? They're like, well, we get these 50 accounts and we need to cross-sell to them. Okay. How do you look at the 50 accounts? And they finally asked me their first Agile question, which is, how do we know we've assigned the best 50 accounts to our salespeople? So now if you take a look at that and go, okay, now that is the first thing that we're going to work on. But we're going to do that in a spreadsheet first. And we're going to determine and we're going to learn what are the different data sources that we need in order to get that optimum thing. Then we're going to roll that out to a smaller division, let them do it, and then we'll start to build a data warehouse with that being the first output. Now, the beauty of that, if you think about that, that's literally a 3-month project. Now, I could roll that out to everybody in the company while we're doing the next thing and while we're doing the next thing. Now, at the end of the day, it's still going to take 3 years to build that data warehouse. However, I'm going to have 30 reports that are operationalized and generating revenue by the time we're done versus the reverse. That's really what Agile is in a nutshell.
Wow, that's so impressive to hear it in that form, because I think not everybody can interpret what is really Agile about. And I've heard so many wrong definitions. And as you said, one of the very common things is that everybody creates their own little concoction of tools and say, okay, that's Agile. That's how we do it in this company. Yeah, but it's not the real Agile as it should be. Yeah.
And I think it's been commoditized. I think most organizations that are selling transformation are selling training. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, you're a Six Sigma guy, and Six Sigma is phenomenal. Let's just take that for a second, right? Nobody really ever gets to Six Sigma, right? Because the cost savings you're going to get from 3 to 4 Sigma are astronomical versus what you spent, right? Like the ROI to go from 3 Sigma to 4 Sigma is incredible. ROI is a little bit less to go from 4 to 5, and it's stupid to go from 5 to 6. Is that fair, right? Yeah. It's same thing kind of happens with Agile is these guys go out there and they say, oh, we're going to make you faster, whatever. What they're really good at, and these people are phenomenal at it. The biggest Agilists out there are phenomenal at building Agile teams. What they lack is the ability to then translate that to the bigger market. So how do we put programs together? How do we do portfolios? And how do we still answer the question to the executives of what this is going to cost? How long is this going to take? And I'm telling you, it's maddening when you deal with a true Agilist sometimes because you go, how long will this take? And they go, I don't know, we're Agile. It's like, no. I mean, we still have to say, okay, we're going to time box this into 6 months, see how much we're going to put into it and see what the ROI is in order to make business decisions. You don't just get blank checks with no delivery dates. And so that's where I'm starting to see a lot of the issues is once they've got the team going and they've invested in all this training, they're still not scaling. In scaling into that way that we got multiple teams working together, larger programs putting together, all in this Agile format.
Yeah, fantastic. If there's a company thinking about implementing Agile, what would be the first things you would recommend them to do?
The biggest thing that I always recommend is to put 2 years worth of projects on the list and to get into what is the actual business question. So where organizations have the biggest issue is that product owner role. It's really getting somebody to start thinking in what problems are we solving, not what do we need. So again, we need a data warehouse. Well, of course, it's easy to say that. And when you say that, they're thinking that every piece of data is going to be there and whatever I think of next, it'll magically appear. It's not true. But if you get somebody who's skilled as a coach to be able to get down to that root question again of how do we know we've assigned the best 50 accounts, right, to the salesperson? Then the next question is, how do we identify the cross-sell opportunities within those 50 accounts? Then the next question is, how do we replicate that to someone else? And, that kind of, what are the roles that are buying from us? And as you can see, it grows, but by asking those questions, that's agile. Right? Not saying, oh, I need to get a financial feed in here. I need to get the HR feed in here. No. Right? We need to know what those are. The other thing is that they run out of stuff. So when I'm at a very tactical level running a software development project, I need to be a minimum of 2 sprints ahead. And what I mean by that is if you've time boxed a sprint, most people do 2 weeks, right? And let's say my team has a velocity of 100 points. And for those of you that may not know Agile, it's just kind of like saying I've got 80 hours in the week, whatever, but we have 100 points. And that's how many we can do. Well, I need to have a minimum of 300 points identified going into sprint planning, because then I'm choosing the best work. There should be conflict in what I'm choosing to do, right? But if I'm coming in and I have 100 points and I've got 80, then we're going to start to get into waste. So the biggest issue is that they start training the Agile team immediately, but they haven't identified all the Agile questions or have enough runway to satisfy the work that the Agile team needs to keep them Agile. So what I always say is you've got to start up top and you got to start identifying objectives and get some Agile thinking in before you even start touching the development teams.
Yeah. And it really shows that it's so much that type of thinking of asking the right questions. If you just stay like very high level with your questions, then you're never going to get into that level of the way you are just mentioning it right now with Agile, that you really get to the itty gritty and then you know what's actually the right answer to that. And you more or less know how I need to structure now my next couple of steps by asking those right questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've experienced in one of the businesses where I was involved in, and they trained a lot of employees in Scrum, but then afterwards nothing really happened. And that was just such a demotivation for so many people. And also the management, they said, okay, we trained X amount of people, and what is now the result? What came out of it? And I think that lots of companies think that if we train people, that the magic is going to happen, and then we're going to start seeing results coming in. And I think that's just half of the achievements, because it's not just about training people. And what would you say for a company who's thinking about training a lot of people in Scrum? What is other things that they need to pay attention on?
Well, again, it's a transformation. Let's just identify what's happening in training. When they go to training for Scrum, they're learning what the methodology calls ceremonies, and they're learning a common language. So for instance, they may have never estimated by story point before. Okay, so that's great. We estimate in hours in waterfall, and you estimate in story points so all we're doing is changing the language. There's no effective change going above that on how we're getting requirements and how we're asking questions and how we've structured the team and all those other. So the mindset is, oh, we're going to go put them into this room. They're going to learn a bunch of definitions and ceremonies. They're going to come out and be operationally faster. It doesn't make sense, but that's what they think when they pay for it. So there's got to be a transformational change in how even the executives ask for reports. Right? Yeah. So for instance, in traditional project management world, we say, okay, this project's going to take 6 months and it's going to be $200,000. Okay. Then you wait the 6 months and then you judge success or failure. In an agile world, you can say, well, we have 6 months and $100,000 to invest. But what we're going to do is invest 2 months and $50,000, and we're going to see what that gets us. And if it's not getting the results we're looking for, we're going to dump the program and we're going to pivot to something else. That's when you're starting to get into really good agile management, right? Because agile in project management, the ceremonies are the same, but the language that we use is different. So for instance, waterfall project management is all about risk avoidance. If you think about it, there's risk management, there's lessons learned, there's status meetings, but everything is engineered to not fail, right? Whereas agile, all the language is seeking success. So you are looking to fail fast because you're trying to say, is this doable? So instead of, you have something called a spike in Agile, which says if I'm breaking down a project, there's always that one thing that's the highest risk. That's where I want to start in Agile. In project management, you want that midway through or towards the end, right? But in Agile, whatever the hardest thing is first that we think is going to derail the project, I want to tackle that in the first 2 weeks. Because if we can't figure out how to do it, then we're just going to dump the whole thing and go to the next idea. So, I mean, when they say we're going to just train people, you can't just give people different language and expect different results. You have to look at the behavior of the entire organization and the covenant between that behavior. That's the only way success is going to be. Otherwise, but you saw it, right? So let me go back to Six Sigma. How many times did you see where the company says the first thing we're going to do in implementing our Six Sigma project is get everybody yellow belt certified? What does that do? What is getting a yellow belt certification for a line worker who could care less about any of those terms, right? And the fact that they clicked through a computer module and said, yep, you're a yellow belt. But that's the first step versus starting with a master black belt, indoctrinating black belts, and then getting your green belts involved, right? Really breaking these projects down. And then honestly, that lowest layer, they don't ever have to have a belt. They just don't. Because all we're going to do is say, this is the way work is now. And they're like, cool. You know what I mean? Like they get it. Yeah. So when you start with that lowest layer and you don't change any of the behaviors above, it's going to fail. It's going to fail.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good. Do you have for Agile similar like a deployment champion? Is there somebody that acts as a deployment champion for the program? Does it have the same name or is it?
No, they should be. They should be an Agile coach, without a doubt. Yeah. And I do a thing when I'm on stage. But there's the Agile coach and then there's the Agile clown. The Agile coach starts with the executive layer and is the education and again, rolls out as necessary. The Agile clown starts at the team level. That's where they start. So whenever I'm interviewing, it's also not just how well do you know the methodology, but what is the largest scale of teams that you had working under one roof? That's the question you ask. Because I guarantee you 98% of them out there, 1 to 2 teams. That's it. Yeah. That's all they got to.
Okay. Wow. Well, then definitely now when I reflect back, there has been so many mistakes done because, for example, the role of the Agile coach, that was not even existent because we just trained all these people. And then all these people were like, okay, we got now a new skill set, but what's going to happen next? There was no coach who was actually doing the direction of what needs to happen. And that's why everybody forgot about the program, I think, about 12 months later. And the management saw it as a waste of money, that everybody went through some type of training and then there was no return on investment. They didn't see any projects coming out of it. But of course, if you don't even have a coach there who is going to be one of the lead people who's going to then push the program forward, then it's of course not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've seen the PMBOK, right? The project management body of knowledge.
Yeah.
Do we do everything in that in every project? No. But for some reason, everybody thinks the Agile methodology, which is PMBOK is a methodology. So one thing a coach should be doing is looking at, like, I went into one organization and they were like, yeah, every time we do this retrospective, just nothing comes out of it. It's a big waste of a meeting. And I was like, then don't do it. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, well, if it's not giving you results, why are you doing it? Well, because it's part of the methodology. I was like, that's not a reason to hold a meeting for everybody, right? Yeah. So you need to bring people in and they need to want to change in order for that to change. So if this ceremony is not bringing anything, there is a purpose. There's a good reason to do it. But if people aren't in the mindset, let's kill it, and then nature will take its course. They'll start going, hey, we need to be able to have more insight into the process. You go, great, I got this cool thing called the retrospective. Then they understand why they're doing it, right? But all you do is put in all these different ceremonies and change a bunch of terms. It's not going to change a thing. Right? Yeah. People think you go Agile. I always say, too, if you have a low relationship with your development team or low trust factor with your development team, going Agile is going to make it worse. Agile is actually a stricter methodology than Waterfall. It really is, because everything's so time boxed. You got 2 weeks. There's covenants that people have to make. It really requires more diligence and more execution and more trust than Waterfall does.
Wow, that's amazing. What you just mentioned, I can also see that in the Six Sigma world, because we have so many tools that are inside of each of those phases of Six Sigma project that somehow people fall into the perception that they have to use all those tools in order to get through the toll gate and then get to the next phase. And I'm thinking like, okay, if you would want to really solve that problem that we have in the organization and you're going to be using all those tools, it's going to take you like 4 or 5 months to finish the project. But in reality, you could finish the project in 1 month. Yeah? Why don't you just use tool number 3 3 from your define phase, use tool number 8 and 10 from your measure phase, and so forth, so that you just take the things that you need. I would say it's like just like situational leadership. In this case would be situational project management, that you would just take the tools that you need for that specific situation and that specific problem and just leave the rest away because you might not even need it. It's not even maybe applicable for that type of issues or problems.
Yeah.
So that's something I think people really need to realize, that you don't have to be using the whole shebang every time you go through a problem solving exercise.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting, though, is it's perpetuated by the training world as well. So you have an organization that gets massive results, whatever that may be, right? So the Toyota way or whatever, right? All of a sudden, somebody did a Six Sigma project, got massive results, wrote a book about it, and everybody's like, oh, we're going to go do Six Sigma because it's going to give us those level of results, right? But you had TQM before, we had ISO before. Now is it TPM's the latest, right? Total Product Management, which, by the way, is TQM, Six Sigma. It's all the same stuff. We just changed the terms again. But look, these training organizations are smart because they're like, oh, no, you failed with Six Sigma? Do TPM. That'll work fine. Yeah, no, it's the same stuff, y'all. It's just, right, the flavor it lands. I liken it to diets or exercise programs, right? I mean, there's 1,001 diets, but the net is people are like, well, I can't do that diet because I don't want to give up my ice cream. And I was like, okay, it's the ice cream that's the issue. It's not the diet, right? But I mean, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
There's so many variations of ways to become more productive, but if you don't solve the root cause, trust issues or training issues, that kind of stuff, it doesn't matter what methodology you roll out, it's going to fail.
That's right. So true. Could you tell us some of the pros and cons you have experienced using the Scrum method?
Yeah. I mean, so what I love about Agile, again, is first of all, the pivot to business. So if you think about traditional project management, and let's say we're doing something as large as like a ERP or, SAP implementation or something like that, 3-4 year project, a lot of times by the time you deliver the project, the business has changed. Right. But because we're all risk avoidance in project management. So anytime you suggest something new, oh, that's a scope change. Oh, we got to adjust all of these different costs. We got to go through a change control management piece. That was the part that we were adding process to slow things down. Those are all good processes. I'm not against those. But again, in a 3-year project, like going into the pandemic, everybody was just cruising and all of a sudden the world shuts down. Right? How do you adjust? Agile has that 3-year look, but it's operational every 2 weeks so that you can pivot. And so something pops up, you can go, great, we'll put that into the backlog. As soon as that becomes, the highest priority, it'll get put into a sprint and then it'll get done. So I do like that kind of cadence. It also is changing just some of the covenants that I think so many projects add so many processes because of past failures, but you never go back. Every time somebody adds a process, they don't ever go back and say, which process could we get rid of because we're doing this now, right? So it just becomes add. So I do like the Agile methodology in sense of the team buy-in as well. So I think when you're really mature and doing well, that team is estimating the work. They're the ones committing to the sprint. Then they make a deal with the product owner that this is going to get done, and they focus and get it done, which means, look, if things are going bad and we need to put a few in extra hours, that was our commitment, that was our word. So we're going to knock that out, right? Yeah. There's a lot of those types of things that I've seen. But the biggest thing to me is the ability to pivot and adapt and change. Yeah. It takes away all those change control processes because things can freely change at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any downside you have seen so far when you look at Agile compared to other project management methods like PMI or anything else?
Yeah, I mean, the downsides is the misunderstanding and then the people that wield that. So a couple of true horror stories. Again, people use it for what I call cowboy coding, which is just, they say, we can't tell you when we're going to be done because we're Agile. We can't tell you how much it's going to cost because we're Agile. And that's just false. You can still do projections and costs and all of that. Earned value, people that understand earned value in project management, I think earned value is only applicable in Agile. I don't think earned value is applicable in traditional project management because the amount of data that you need to get in order for that to be successful, most people don't estimate to the hour, so therefore it can't be. But in Agile, because there's one covenant in Agile that really makes that tick, which is you don't get partial credit. So if I have a story that's 5 points and I don't complete it within the sprint, I don't get 3 of the 5 points, 0 for that, and then I get the 5 in the next one. That covenant alone allows earned value to be big. But the downside, like I was talking with a lady who's a pure Agilist, and I was in charge of forecasting cost and resources. And so I said, look, I know you're on this project. I know it's 2 weeks of sprint. I'm just going to use 40 hours of the developer or 80 hours of the developer to forecast cost. She goes, you can't do that. I said, why? She goes, because we do story points. And I'm like, oh, no, I understand story points and velocity, whatever. But in terms, these are all salary employees, salaries based on 40 hours a week. So I just need to translate this to a cost on the project. She goes, you can't do that. I said, why? Because we do story points, not hours. And so I finally had to go, ma'am, can I pay you in story points? Or would you like to be paid in actual dollars? Like at some point, a story point is just a mythical thing that needs to be translated to a cost for a company. It just does, right? And I understand why you're doing story points and not hours. I get that. But at some point, we still have to face reality. So like, I'll give you a check in story points, and if you can cash it, good luck to you. We'll see how that works. But that's the downside, is people get into this, they hold on to the methodology, or they use it as almost like they're protesting big corporate. You know what I mean? Like there's this new way of thinking. That's a lot of the downside of Agile. And just the misunderstanding that if we adopt Agile, things will be faster. Right. But if you haven't done the work in order to operationalize it, be faster, it won't be. It's just going to be a different way of calling it waterfall.
Well, thanks for explaining that. And it definitely made it much clearer for me, because in my past, I have not had that much experience with Scrum and Agile. And the little experience I had, it was where management burned their fingers by trying to implement it. So I'm so happy that I was able to see now that from the lens of somebody who has used it many times, and also in a positive way. So that's really good, because I think a lot of people see the literature and then they have all these visions of the bright future, but it's really good to see somebody who has really done it. So I'm so happy that you were able to explain that to us. And there's one thing that I would like to cover for today as well, is about the books that you have written. You have written a couple of books, and maybe let's start with the first book you wrote, and then we just make our way to your latest book that you have written.
Yeah, first book was actually just the Everything Project Management book. My first book, I was shopping and we came across a publisher and they're like, we'd like you to rewrite this book, which was already a series. There's an Everything series. It's like Everything Project Management, Everything Gardening, Everything Lawyer, that kind of stuff. So I rewrote that book. Project Management That Works is the first book that had my theories. Things that we implemented at a bank, at a PMO, different ways of looking at risk. So again, people doing methodologies, they do this risk assessment, but the risk assessment doesn't really tell you anything, right? Some people are fancy. It's scored like 4.3 or it gives you a risk of medium. But like, how do I translate that to an executive of cost and time? And then also people do something called lessons learned, which is great, but they end up in a spreadsheet somewhere and nobody ever reviews them. Nobody ever goes through them. And so I take a look at those things and I built a risk assessment from lessons learned that then used the actual lesson learned and translated that to either days to add of risk or cost to add of risk. And when I had pushback, so for instance, I could say, look, I need to add 30 days of risk to this project. And executives would go, you're nuts. And I go, well, we lost 15 days on this project because of this. We lost 40 days on this project because of this. And it was all things that happened right there at the bank. And I was able to use that, get the time that we need. And we had a 99% delivery rate on time in the bank because we did adequate risk management. But you could come in, you never run a project for me at all, and I would give you 7 years worth of insights just through a questionnaire. So Project Management That Works has that level of stuff in it. It was just different things like that I wanted to tweak certain things to really operationalize it and make it cost effective. As I started to progress in my career, then there was a lot of executive conversations around some of those things. So I wrote a book called Stop Playing Games, which is just calls out the games that managers and executive managers and project managers play with each other versus just having an honest conversation and getting business, right? So it became a guide to navigate organizational politics is what that one was about. Co-authored a book called Agile Almanac, which is 15 different authors got together and wrote how do you scale Agile into the enterprise around risk and budget, technology, all of those. And then my last book I wrote was called No Day But Today, which is a very personal book. It takes a lot of the project management theories and things that I've practiced my whole life and applied them to your personal life and how you go after goals and answer the question, how do you want to be remembered? Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? But when you start to have that, it's no different to me than I want to build a data warehouse. A huge statement, right? I want to leave a good legacy, huge statement. How do you then what are the techniques that you can break that down into actions and activities that I could do today that could lead me towards that legacy? And that's what No Day But Today did.
That's amazing. I could really see it's like a sequel, like all the things that you've learned throughout your life and through all the companies you've worked with, that you're really putting that all and packaging it into these books. That's fantastic. How long does it take you on average to write one of those books?
I haven't written one in a few years. And when I did it through Publishing Arm. Now, I mean, I could pump out a book in 2 hours and have it on Amazon, right? The way technology has gone and the difference in publishing. So, I mean, project management that works was an 8-month, odyssey from the point that it took me 2 years to sell it and to get it there, and then 8 months to actually write it and publish it from that perspective. So Stop Playing Games was about 6 months. No Day But Today was, far shorter because I self-published that one. But yeah, and now everybody's got a book, right? I mean, you're like, have you seen my book? I was like, nah, I haven't seen your book.
It's like there's so many now. How do you actually catch up with all of them?
Right. There's still some nice ones out there, but yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But I especially like from all the books that you just mentioned, like the one from Stop Playing Games. I think that's one of the things, if I reflect to the corporate world, that there's just so much waste going on, so much energy being wasted on all these political games that are going within the corporation, and people just trying to cover their backs and fighting with their elbows instead of working together, working as a team and trying to all together achieve one goal and not to have all these hidden agendas. And I think one can save a lot of time by stop playing games.
I'll give you a key one. One of my favorites is I always say that every project starts with a lie, because what you do as a project manager is when you have your budget. So let's say this project's $1 million. What are you going to submit to your sponsor? I'm actually what do you submit to your sponsor at that point? If you need $1 million to solve it, what do you submit?
Well, many people will say, well, I'll try to start just with half of it or even none of it. But, it's impossible. Then,
or some will go 1.5, 1.75, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing normally an executive does is cut the budget by 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
Right. So what you do is pad your estimate, and you're trying to out pad the cut. So what you're doing now is lying about how much it's going to cost. Then the manager cuts it, and then you just turn around and accept that. And now you're excited because I won the game, versus going in there going, this is what it takes. If you cut anything out, then what scope do you want to remove? But having that honest conversation that I didn't pad it, right? Yeah. But again, what happened is you had a project that was $1 million. They cut it to 800,000, and then you got yelled at because it went over budget. Yeah. You're like, whose budget? The one that I submitted, or the one that you made me take, right? I mean, like, I already told you it was going to cost this much. You just didn't believe me, and now I'm in trouble again, right? So those are the games that happen, things like that. And it teaches how to have the conversations.
Yeah. Well, that scenario you just put out there is really something that one sees over and over again.
Yeah.
I remember like doing all these budget rounds at the end of the year, and it's okay, how much do you need for employee training? How much do you need for this? How much do you need for travel budget and your T&E? And I was really thinking, okay, how much should I put on top of what I really need? Because as you said, they're always going to start cutting down a little bit on here and chopping a little bit off there. And then the funny thing is that if there's specific budget that you've had allocated to you or to your team, and you're getting to the end of the year and you did not use up all of that budget, and then they start spending that budget like crazy because you say, okay, if I don't spend it all, if I don't get rid of it by end of the year, then they say, hey, from your 1 million, you only used 800,000. That means that next year you're only going to get 800,000 and not 1 million again.
Right.
So it's always like, when you're reaching the end of the year, either managers are struggling in surviving because they spend too early the budget, or you have managers who are trying to spend a lot of money because they say, oh, we did not really spend all what I had in budget. So it just gets always very hectic at the end of each year. Yeah.
They're all games. They're all games.
Exactly. And then what was really interesting, what a lot of companies do, they say, well, we did not use the budget for all of the trainings that we had planned for the employees. So let's say around about, if one calculates with $2,000 to $3,000 for budget per headcount for training, but only 2 or 3 people took the training in my team, so I still have budget left. Let's now put that into another bucket, which I can use, which I spent a little bit too much on, I don't know, on travel or something. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's just like doing puzzle work, back and forth. And everybody's, as you said, just playing games back and forth, and it's not being very efficient.
That's right. And wasteful. I mean, the amount of money that's wasted is insane.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thanks a lot for that overview of your books. And one more thing I wanted to cover with you, and you mentioned that you worked at GE. There, I do know that when they say you are a project manager, then you are really a project manager, and not like some companies where anybody who just comes back from a long holiday and that they do not know what to do with the person, they say, okay, you are now a project manager, and then the person has to somehow struggle their way through. And then you have, again, the spectrum. Either you have a title of a project manager and you do not have anything to say in the organization. They just throw work at you and you just have to do as your manager says. Or you have on the other spectrum, you have a project manager who is actually defining the future of the company, who is looking at the vision and the mission of the company and is speaking with the CEO and all the C-level management on how we're going to get the strategic projects in line and what are we going to book for next year. And therefore, you have that whole spectrum between a project manager who has the same title, who has nothing to say, and to the other spectrum of one who's really defining the future of the company. And somewhere in the middle is where we are now, where a lot of people are.
I was doing work with this company. Actually, they keep all the infectious diseases and you can rent them from them in order to do studies, that kind of stuff. And so it's very clinical based. And there's a job title there called biostatistician, which is, again, something you really study for, whatever. And so I'm in this meeting and I'm proving their PMO and their project management practices. And the lady says, well, I'll be the project manager for this. And I said, okay, cool. I'll be the biostatistician. And she went, what? And I was like, oh, I just thought we were picking the jobs that we wanted to do. And she was like, yeah, I'm doing the project management. And I was like, I know. And I'm going to do the biostatistician. She goes, is that something I went to school for and I'm certified in and I had to keep my studies going? I was like, right. And that's what I do with project management. But I just thought we were like picking the cool titles, right? It finally dawned in on her. I was like, you can't just say that. You can say, I'm going to run this project or I'll be the team lead. But when you use the term project manager, that's the same as me saying, I want to be a biostatistician.
Yeah.
Same thing, right? I know math. I'm an accountant, right? It's not the same, right? Yeah. So
I love that. Oh, I've seen so many examples where they just throw that title around and it's really scary. And it really brings a lot of demotivation to those who are the real project managers and know what they're doing. And then suddenly you get somebody in your team who's supposed to know what they're doing. And you're just thinking, oh my gosh, it's not the way it should be. There should be more standardization thing on that title. That's why every time I was hiring somebody for my team and they would say, oh, I've done projects, I've been doing project management. And then I really had to drill deeper. It's like, okay, tell me more about it. Yeah, what do you mean you've been doing projects? What are your certifications? What is your experience? What projects have you done? And could you give me some examples? And then you start really learning, okay, now I'm trying to figure out in which of that scala that we just spoke about, where was this person most of their life as a project manager? But then if you have somebody who comes with their bio and you see, oh, this person worked for GE. Okay, now I think I know what type of project manager that is. Yeah. Yeah. So that is, I think, the reputation of a project manager really defines a lot on which companies you have worked for. And people who are in projects, you know, okay, this and this company, I know they have fantastic project management programs and whoever is certified, they must be really good. And other companies who say, I know a lot of project managers coming from that area and maybe I do not hire those kind of people.
yeah, not so much. Yeah, for sure.
Great. Well, it was a real joy to speak to you about these topics, project management and about Scrum and Agile. I learned a lot of things myself because, as I mentioned, I've not been doing too much with Agile and Scrum in the past, but it really awoken more curiosity on my side. So I will definitely do a little bit more research and experimentation on that area. And thank you so much, Rick, for that very good content that you delivered. Where can my listeners find you?
Yeah, on social medias. Rick A. Morris is what I go by. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook that way. R Squared Consulting, you can spell that out. SQUARED Consulting.com is the easiest way to find me.
Excellent. I'll be putting that into the show notes so that anybody can just click on the link and then have access to that right away. And is there any services that you can provide to the listeners?
Yeah, through Centric Consulting, we have basically every gamut from assessment to delivery to PPM tool implementations and everywhere in between. So we either staff project managers or we help you develop your ePMOs and PMOs to be more efficient. And we're not a one-size-fits-all kind of organization. We really get in with our clients and make sure that we understand what their needs are and either can help them, just create that roadmap for delivery, help them deliver it themselves, or do everything from beginning to end. So really excited to be with Centric and excited to see what the future is going to be for that.
Fantastic. Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rick, for your time. It was fantastic to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rick. In the show notes, you will find all the links to where to find him. Now that you have heard more about Scrum, you can decide whether it resonates with you. If it does, then please go ahead and contact Rick. If you think that other methodologies resonate better with you, then please look at the online courses offered by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, where you will find the top Lean certification and Six Sigma certifications that are directly linked to an increase of your market value and also a financial benefit for your manager, because during your certification, you will be solving real business issues. Please rate, subscribe, and send in your comments and share with those who you think could profit from this episode. It's very much appreciated and I'm grateful for your messages. I'm also a work in progress and strive to do things better every day. This podcast is sponsored by Wave Business Excellence Footprint, where we believe that investing in yourself is the best investment you can make. On the website www.wave-bef.com, you will find courses that are designed for managers and for employees who strive to become better every day. If you do not have a Lean Six Sigma certification, then you will find an outstanding certification program with Wave. In case you already have a certification, then we have other courses that will further enhance your skills. On the website, look under the tab Courses for Employees to see what courses resonate with you. All these courses are designed to take you to the next career development level. Thank you, stay tuned, and see you in the next episode of First Waves.